So if you're a remodeler, design builder, home builder, don't really matter. And you've ever said $300 leads are too expensive, or an $800 cost per job is too expensive, then you're thinking like a homeowner and not a business owner. And in this video, I'm probably going to piss a lot of people off, but hopefully the people who don't get pissed off will make you rich. And so today, I want to talk about the most important number in marketing, which is going to be your CAC, your cost of acquisition. How much does it cost for you to get a closed job? Okay. And I'm going to show you what good looks like. I'm going to show you what bad looks like. I'm going to show you some benchmarks. I'm going to show you some things on how you can fix it, and how to know if what you're doing is actually working. Okay. And so most remodelers, they're going to stare at their cost per lead, their lead volume, and they usually operate off a gut feeling like, is this expensive? Okay. And the issue is that you need data, right? Too many people are trying to fly a plane with blindfolds on, and they hate their marketing company. And most marketing companies are bad, but it is not the marketing company's job to work in a corner in isolation. Their job is to work with you to help you figure out these numbers and to make them better. Okay. So how much profit do I make per job, and how much am I willing to use to buy the next job? That is the fundamental question that we're going to be asking. And so I'm going to bring up my handy dandy iPad with notes here so you can understand how this whole thing works. Okay. So we have a formula: lifetime gross profit to CAC. This is a ratio. Okay. And this is honestly the fundamental unit that you need to know in your business, right? So let's just say in this example, you have a $100,000 remodel. Okay. You have a 30% gross margin, meaning you make 30K in gross profit. Now, a lot of contractors don't know what gross margin is. This is just your cost, your COGS, so your cost of material plus your labor, okay? So in this case, this is going to be roughly 70,000. This is the expense for that job. So if you make 30,000 in gross profit, that is the LTGP. Now, usually this number is actually higher because if they refer you or they're a repeat customer and they get work later on, this number actually goes up. But if they only do one job with you, then we're going to use this as the LTGP. So it's 30K. Okay. Now, the question becomes, if we're going to make 30,000 in gross profit, what are we willing to spend to get that job? And this is where companies want to be cheap. And the thing is, if a company is willing to spend more than you to get the same job, then they're probably going to get that job. And people bid on this. When you go on Google and you're bidding for a cost per lead, it's the companies that can afford to spend more make more money. And this is a huge misconception. People want to be getting the cheapest leads. And yes, you do want to drive your cost per lead down. However, the best companies that are doing $10 million a year, $15 million a year, they're not too worried about the cost, especially when the ticket is so high, right? You can increase how much you make per customer, per lead, by having a good sales process. You speed the lead. You actually call the leads. You don't miss phone calls. You have a dialed in sales motion where you have your site visit, you have your design contract, you have everything planned out. So no lead slips through the crack, and you're maximizing every lead. You're leaving the best impression. And that way you're not competing on price. You're more competing on value, which most companies do not do. Okay. Now that that's said, the question is, what do we want our CAC to be? Okay. Now, anything over 5-to-1 is healthy, meaning you should be scaling that. If you're going to get $5 in gross profit for every dollar you spend, then we should be spending that all day. Now, there's a bunch of other issues that will make this sometimes difficult, which I'll get into. But in this example, that means you could spend up to $6,000 to get a customer and have a 5-to-1 return, right? Which is something that we should be doing all day. Now, this CAC, right, is how you figure out your fucking marketing budget, okay? So if you say, I'm willing to spend $6,000 to get a customer, then you should be willing to spend $6,000 a month if you were trying to get a project every single month. Again, like it's baffles my brain how these companies will expect to grow besides word of mouth and referrals when they want to spend $1,000 a month and add an extra $1 million in revenue. It just doesn't work that way. I wish it did. If it did, then every construction company would be fucking making money. But every construction company is typically burnt out, competing on price, overworked, underpaid. Their crews don't want to work with them. Their customers don't get a good experience, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a race to the bottom. So I'm trying to help these companies because I talk to too many who are uneducated on marketing, and they operate like a construction company that, 20 years ago, and they're wondering why they're not winning. So I hope that this is helpful, okay? So, again, this is a simple example. If you know you're going to make 30K in gross profit, how much are you willing to spend to get a customer? And in the beginning, you're not going to know, right? You're going to have to take a budget that's like, okay, I'm willing to test with 6K, right? And figure out if this can get me a customer. And it might not, because your marketing's not good enough, your brand's not there, the messaging's not right, the sales motion isn't dialed in. But you need to basically lose money to then track the money to then print money. And for some reason, contractors fucking do this shit backwards, or they expect to print money first, they then want to track the money, and then they never expect to lose money, which just doesn't make any fucking sense, okay? So again, based on this math, right, if you're a good company, you have a CRM, you're tracking all this stuff, which you should be, then let me show you how you can then figure out your revenue goals. Let's say you're a $2 million company. You're doing about what? We'll say 10% net, which is not good, but we'll just say 10% net. So you take home 200K. Okay, cool. Now let's say you want to add, your goal is to get to 3.5 million. Okay. Now most companies just try and guess and throw shit at the wall to try and add this 1.5 million. Now, if you know that you need to add 1.5 mil in addition to what you're currently doing, then the question becomes, what's the average ticket, right? So I'm going to put average ticket, right? What's our gross margin, right? And what's our CAC? And then obviously I'm going to break down your CAC as a factor of your cost per lead, right? Your booking rate, book rate, and then your close rate, okay? That's what determines all of this, okay? So if you want to make 1.5 million, let's say your average ticket is 100K. Your average gross margin is 30%, which is healthy. And your CAC, just to put that in perspective, that means we need to get 15 jobs at 100K. If we need to get 15 jobs, right? And let's just say your CAC right now is 3,200. So that's like, how much are you spending to get the job, right? And that might be marketing fees, it might be advertising spend, it might be labor, whatever it is, right? Then by simple math, you do 15 times 3,200, and I don't know that off the top of my head, but it's around 45K. So you need to spend 45K and maintain these numbers in order for you to hit that revenue target. But for some reason, no construction company knows their numbers, which is crazy to me, because that's literally the biggest thing that separates the bad companies from the good companies. Is the good companies charge higher prices, they track everything, and they make database decisions. I know it sounds like a cliche, but it's like that for a reason, okay? So let me give you another example. Let's say you did $1 million in sales, right? Just as an example. And let's say you spent 30K in marketing. It's another way you can calculate your CAC. If you spent, and you did 12 projects, okay? This is how you can calculate it if you don't have your numbers. So you can take a handy dandy calculator and you can do 1 million divided by 12 means our average ticket was 83K. Cool, right? We spent 30 grand on marketing. So we take 30 grand divided by 12 means it costed us 2,500 per job one. So this is our CAC. Now, how do we evaluate if this is good or bad, right? Because we don't have all the numbers yet. If we have a 30% gross margin, which again, you should be shooting for, if you take 80,000 times 0.3, that means you made 24K in gross profit. Now, let's evaluate that with our CAC, which is 2,500. This is a 10x return. That means that if these are your numbers, you should be dialing up the spend. Now, let's just say that for example, let's just say your average ticket was, instead of 83K, let's say it was 40K, okay? So we'll take this out and we'll put 40K. And let's say you still had 30% margins. That means you made $12,000, okay, in gross profit. 12,000 in gross profit. 12,000 divided by 2,500 is a 4.8x return. So this is where it's good, it's profitable, but it's borderline, right? So that means that we need to get this ratio higher, ideally above 5-to-1 before we spend any more money on marketing. So the question becomes, well, how do we decrease CAC? Great question, okay? So the first thing is we can always sell bigger projects, okay? Bigger projects, because that means that if we're selling instead of a 40K job average ticket, we sell an 80K average ticket, we can now spend more to get those customers. That's one way of doing it, okay? Second thing is we can raise our gross margin. And you can either do that by raising price or decreasing costs. This is tough to do, but you want to be at 30% at a minimum, okay? Another thing we can do is we can lower our cost per lead, right? We can do this with better ads, better messaging. We can do it with branding. There's a bunch of ways to get nitty-gritty into this, right? Our landing pages, right? Awesome. We can increase our booking rate. So this would be speed to lead. Lead. This is a sales process. Example, we had a client who wanted to focus on high-ticket outdoor living spaces. So anytime a lead came in for that service over a week, we immediately call them, immediately try and book them, but we would also send them projects that were very similar. So we sent them, hey, here's an outdoor kitchen that we added a pergola, et cetera, et cetera. Then the next day it's like, hey, check out this green room addition we added in the backyard. Boom. That way we're sending proof, we're nurturing, because now more people are going to want to book with us, right? And lastly, close rate, okay? Close rate is a bunch of things. It's like show up with a packet, right? Give them something to hold that shows, you know, you've been in business, your reviews, QR codes to see different projects, testimonials, etc., right? Have a sales process, okay? Train for objections, okay? Build the relationship. I can't tell you how many companies just send the price and then they email it and that's it. So these are all things that you can do to, again, decrease your CAC, okay? And ultimately, like, the companies that win are the companies that can make the most on the customers and get the most for the least, right? And so I'm tired of these construction companies trying to grow year after year without spending any money on marketing. It's going to get harder and harder, and you don't want to be waiting until you're slow, you're deprived on cash to try and figure out how to do marketing. If you do that, it's a race to the bottom, and I wish you the best of luck. But I can tell you out of experience, it's probably not going to work out very well, okay? So now let me just give you some benchmarks to end this off. If you are a high ticket, again, this is what we focus on. We spent over $1 million last year on ads on just Facebook alone. So our typical cost per lead is going to be anywhere from $50 to $150. This is your cost per lead. Our booking rate is typically going to be book rate, especially for Meta, where it's lower intent, is going to be anywhere from 30 to 60%. Anything below that is for sure a booking problem, but 60% is kind of where we're aiming for. Your close rate, so this is once you do either a design contract or if you send over a proposal or a contract or a quote, the close rate for once you send over pricing should be 30%. Meaning if you send a price or you do an estimate and a site visit and you know you're doing all the things you should be closing 1 out of 3. If you're not, then it doesn't matter what marketing you do, your CAC's always going to go up. I'll give you an example real quick, the difference that this makes. So let's say you spend $100 per lead. I'm going to show you 2 different examples of 2 different companies, right? So you get, let's say for 1,000, you get 10 leads. 10 leads, okay? Let's say that this person gets 30% booking, means they have 3 site visits. This is booking. Now here you have a 60%, okay? So this is 6 site visits. Let's say your close rate on this one is 15%. 15% means you probably didn't zero closes. And this was a major L. Okay. Now over here, let's say you had a 30% close rate, right? This leads to 2 closes, right? So what does that mean, right? It means that you spent $1,000 on both, and it's going to be more than $1,000 because you still haven't closed anybody. And on this one, it was a $500 CAC, right? And the only thing that changed was the booking rate and the close rate. Those are the only 2 numbers that changed, and it led to such a difference in the terms of the CAC, okay? And I know that this can be kind of confusing, but the idea is focus on not how cheap the leads are, but focus on your booking rate, your close rate, and your cost per lead. But again, the cost per lead matters less. I would rather spend $1,000 to get a lead, but they're extremely qualified. I added a bunch of friction. I showed them the pricing up front. They still filled out the form because of our branding, our follow-up, our sales process, and we close them, then have 30 junk leads that you don't follow up anyway, and you only maybe get 1. It's a lot more work. It's a lot harder to track. It's just a worse business, okay? And so a good cost of acquisition, a good CAC should be expensive. It should be expensive, okay? It shouldn't feel cheap. But you should be making so much on the customer that you're glad to pay that amount of money. And again, the goal isn't to figure out how to get CAC to 0. The goal is to how can I make as much on the customer in gross profit so that I can afford to spend whatever I need to on marketing. And that's how you remove marketing as a constraint on your business. I hope that this was valuable. This was kind of a long video, but if you have any questions, just drop them in the comments. If you want to book a call, you want us to go through these numbers for you, I'd be happy to. I'm a little fired up just because I'm passionate about this stuff, but I hope that this was valuable. I'll see you next time.